What up, YouTube? We back with another video. Man, today, this one is a little different, man. We got a video of an old event that took place back in 2005. Around that time, I was around like 9 years old. I was born in 94. So, 11 years old, actually. Yeah, so I was a little young to really grasp the magnitude of what happened. But after looking at this, man, I just got a question like, are the city officials and the government officials responsible for this? They knew about the dangers of the safety of the city beforehand, but they failed to do anything about it. So let's go ahead and get into this little short documentary, man, about what happened in New Orleans, the Katrina.
August 29th, 2005. It's early morning on the Gulf Coast, and one of the most powerful hurricanes in American history is bearing down on the city of New Orleans.
Crazy.
Meteorologists had been watching Katrina for days. What started as a disorganized cluster of storms in the Bahamas had exploded into a Category 5 monster over the Gulf of Mexico, the first to form there in 25 years.
Hurricane Katrina is still blowing strong tonight, building in strength as it heads across the Gulf of Mexico, and it's expected to hit land a second time.
I was
Ladies
21
and gentlemen,
years
I wish
ago.
I had better news for you, but I do want the citizens to understand that this is very serious and it's of the highest nature. The first choice for every citizen is to figure out a way to leave the city.
By the time evacuation orders went out, over 1 million people had already left. But tens of thousands couldn't, or didn't, and what was coming for them was far worse than they could imagine. Because the storm wasn't the only threat. What destroyed the city had been quietly failing for 40 years, and every single engineer who looked at it knew it. They wrote.
Every single engineer that looked at it knew it. They knew this. It's been failing for over 40 years. They have 40 years to look at this and try and get it right. But let's peep this, man.
Reports. They ran simulations. Just 1 year before the storm, the government modeled exactly what would happen if it broke. The results were catastrophic, and nothing was done.
They looked at what would happen
What
beforehand,
happened next
and
didn't
they
just
knew.
flood a city.
Bro, I know we see movies, we see videos of other places, and thank God, man, that it didn't happen to it wouldn't happen to me or where we live at, but just looking at that and imagine myself being there, that's just so terrifying and devastating, man. I couldn't imagine what the people went through, man. So many people died. So many people lost everything, homes, belongings, everything. The whole city.
It drowned an entire state. To understand what happens on August 29th, 2005,
man.
You first have to understand what New Orleans is and why it was always one catastrophic storm away from disappearing. New Orleans sits in southern Louisiana, wedged between Lake Pontchartrain to the north and the Mississippi River to the south. It is one of the most geographically vulnerable cities in the world. Much of the city lies below sea level.
Check this out. A lot of the city, most of it, he said, lies below sea level. Look at this image. Much of the buildings, the homes, the structures, they are below sea level. And the only thing separating that are levees and dams that are unstable. And the people and the engineers, the government officials, they knew that it was unstable and it wouldn't last long, but they did nothing about it.
In some neighborhoods,
You know what? Just real quick, I got a short video that'll kind of show you in real life what that looks like. Right here, check this out.
So this is how you know New Orleans is below sea level, because I'm walking up the street and a ship is passing like it's a car passing. Mind you, I'm below the ship. I'm looking up at the ship because the water is higher
Crazy.
than the ground.
Let's get back to the video.
Much as 10 feet below. The only reason New Orleans exists at all in its current form is because of an enormous interlocking system of levees, flood walls, and drainage canals that hold back the surrounding water on every side. Take that system away, and New Orleans doesn't flood, it sinks. And everyone in the city knew it.
They knew it.
For generations, this system worked. And for generations, the people of New Orleans lived with the quiet understanding that it had to keep working because the alternative was unthinkable. But there was a problem that engineers and scientists had been raising for years. The levees protecting New Orleans had been built by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers over several decades, and many of them were not built to withstand a major hurricane. Studies going back to the 1990s had modeled what would happen if a large, slow-moving storm made a direct hit on the city. The results were consistently alarming. In 2004, 1 year before Katrina, FEMA funded a disaster simulation exercise called Hurricane Pam. It looked at what would happen if a slow-moving Category 3 hurricane hit New Orleans directly. The simulation predicted tens of thousands of deaths, a city completely submerged, a humanitarian catastrophe of a scale the United States had never experienced. When researchers presented their findings to federal officials, they recall the room not taking it seriously. One scientist described feeling like, quote, "The whole idea was Hurricane Pam was to educate, but, there were a lot of federal folks who were just in the back room laughing. I distinctly got the feeling that I was the geek with a strange accent."
Bro, why should a scientist feel like this? He's presenting you information that is key and essential to the structure of these levees and these dams. And you're laughing it off like it's a laughing matter, joking about him because he got a strange accent. And these are government officials that run the city. They were warned about this several times, many times. They knew what would happen. But they didn't care. And that's messed up to the fullest, man. That's evil. In my book, bro, that's evil. And look what happened.
And that was it. Warnings were there. The problem wasn't a lack of information. It was what happened next. On August 23rd, 2005, a tropical depression formed over the southeastern Bahamas. Within 24 hours, the depression strengthens into Tropical Storm Katrina. It moves west, crosses the Bahamas, and on August 25th, makes its first landfall in South Florida as a Category 1 hurricane with 80 miles per hour winds.
Look at that, bro. It's crazy and scary.
It kills 14 people and moves into the Gulf of Mexico, where it weakens briefly over land before encountering something that changes everything. Something that would make Katrina impossible to stop. The Gulf of Mexico in late August is warm. Unusually warm. The water temperatures Katrina moves over are around 30 degrees Celsius, essentially high-octane fuel for a tropical system. A strong divergence in the upper-level airflow above the storm allows it to rapidly expel heat and intensify with almost nothing holding it back. The results are staggering. On August 27th, Katrina reaches Category 3 strength. The following morning, just after midnight, it is upgraded to Category 4.
Damn.
By 7 a.m. on August 28th, Katrina has become a Category 5 hurricane, the first to form in the Gulf of Mexico in 25 years,
in 2
with
nights.
Maximum sustained winds of 175 miles per hour. Its central pressure drops to 902 millibars, making it one of the most intense Atlantic hurricanes ever recorded. At 10 a.m. on August 28th, New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin issues the first mandatory evacuation order in the city's history.
Ladies and gentlemen, I wish I had better news for you, but we are facing a storm that most of us have feared. I do not want to create panic, but I do want the citizens to understand that this is very serious and it's of the highest nature, and that's why we're taking this unprecedented move. The storm is now a Cat 5, a Category 5, as I appreciate it, so that's why we're ordering a mandatory evacuation.
It is, by any measure, the right call.
Imagine trying to evacuate the whole city all at once. You know, the traffic, people don't even know where to go. They might have relatives that live elsewhere, or they might not. You know, some people ain't got nowhere else to go. That's probably why a lot of people stayed back. And they was probably just praying to God that it didn't go the way it did. But sad to say, it was terrible.
It is also, for many residents, already too late to fully act on. Those without cars, those who are elderly, those who are ill. For hundreds of thousands of people, the order to leave is not the same as the ability to leave. Forecasters at the National Hurricane Center issue warnings that are among the most dire ever written for an American city. One bulletin, released on the afternoon of August 28th, states that the storm surge could cause the levee system to be overtopped, that human suffering will be incredible, that water shortages will make human existence nearly impossible. The bulletin warns of areas that may be uninhabitable for weeks. The language is almost unprecedented for an official weather forecast. But even as those words are being written, Katrina is already beginning to weaken slightly as it moves over slightly cooler waters closer to shore. By the time it makes landfall, it is no longer a Category 5. But the damage that is coming has already been set in motion. The surge, the enormous wall of ocean water pushed ahead of the storm, was built during Katrina's peak intensity. By the time Katrina made landfall, it was no longer a Category 5, but the most dangerous part of the storm had already been created. At 6:10 a.m. on August 29th, 2005, Hurricane Katrina makes landfall at Buras in Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana, approximately 50 miles southeast of New Orleans, as a strong Category 3 hurricane with maximum sustained winds of 125 miles per hour. Its central pressure at landfall is 920 millibars, the fourth lowest ever recorded for a U.S. landfalling hurricane. It then continues northeast and makes a second landfall near the Mississippi-Louisiana border. Initially, federal officials believe the city has dodged the worst of it. The eye of the storm has passed slightly east of New Orleans. The wind damage is serious, but survivable. For a brief period on the morning of August 29th, there is a sense of cautious relief. It doesn't last.
So the eye of the storm passed and they thought they were safe.
Waves from the storm surge had already begun overtopping and eroding levees along the Mississippi River Gulf outlet. At around 5 a.m., on the east side of the Inner Harbor Navigation Canal, a 30-foot section of flood wall, known locally as the Industrial Canal, the very waterway that experts had long warned would act as a deadly funnel, breaches. Water begins pouring through.
Damn. Destroyed everything.
Then a second breach opens. Then another.
Damn. Man, I couldn't imagine being there, bro. Really.
Over the course of the next 24 hours, there will be more than 50
watching
reported
it on
failures
video
in the levee and
actually
flood wall
being there,
system
experiencing
surrounding
it,
New Orleans. The water does not rise slowly.
It's two totally different
It surges.
experiences.
In the lower 9th Ward, residents describe walls of water appearing without warning, filling rooms in seconds. People who had chosen to ride out the storm in their homes suddenly find the water at their waist, then at their chest, then above their head. Those who can reach their attics do. Those who cannot, do not.
Hold the rope. Let him pull to the boat.
Wow.
Hey.
I remember when this happened, man, the devastation lasted for months. They couldn't even get to the people for weeks until after the storm subsided. People didn't have food. They didn't have shelter, no clothing. People were dying due to starvation, you know, due to the conditions that came afterward, after the storm hit. You know, families.
Later, rescuers will find
got
axe
kids.
marks in attic ceilings across the
You
flooded
got
neighborhoods.
old folks.
The marks of people who had managed to hack their way onto rooftops to escape the rising water inside. Some made it, some did not.
Damn.
By the afternoon of August 29th, 20% of New Orleans is underwater. By August 31st, that number reaches 80%.
Ooh.
Some parts of the city are submerged under 15 feet of water.
80% of the city is submerged 15 feet underwater. The whole city flooded. Not just flooded like half of the building, you know, the whole building's underwater. Your whole house is 15 feet underwater.
Famous French Quarter and Garden District, among the oldest parts of the city, and crucially, among the few areas built above sea level, are largely spared. But the vast residential neighborhoods that surround them are gone. Lakeview, the Lower Ninth Ward, St. Bernard area, Gentilly, New Orleans East. These are not flooded, they are submerged.
Submerged.
As the system failed, the disaster shifted from
Bro, the only thing above water is the rooftops. You know, that's devastating, bro.
infrastructure to people. Tens of
And
thousands of people who could not
if you wasn't able to make it,
seek
you wasn't
shelter
able to
in
make
two
it on the roof,
locations,
bro.
the Louisiana Superdome and the New Orleans Convention Center. At the Superdome, roughly 15,000 people arrive before the storm. What follows is
Bro, look at all them people that ain't got nothing. They ain't got nothing but the clothes on their backs, bro. No food, no shelter inside. Inside, it's already super full. I think actually they didn't even open the Superdome until like a week later. It's crazy. Everybody had to stay outside and sleep outside on bare floor concrete.
humanitarian crisis that unfolds on live television in front of the
Look at
entire
that, bro.
country. Food runs out.
Tens of
Water
thousands
runs
of
out.
people.
Toilets stop working. The roof of the Superdome is partially torn open by the wind. People are sleeping on concrete floors in 95-degree heat.
40,000 homes flooded in St. Bernard Parish just
Oh
east of
my
New
goodness.
Orleans. At the Superdome, home to 9,000 storm refugees, chunks of the metal roof have been blown away. The stench of death especially strong around the convention center and the Superdome.
The stench of death. You know, imagine what that's like, bro. You know, to be able to just say that, the stench of death. Like, that's just crazy. That's just crazy to hear.
Where people have moved into the open air as they try to get away from it and closer to where buses and National Guardsmen can get to them.
We've been out here 4 days. We've really been out here 4 days.
Days pass before buses arrive to move people out. Outside, the city is a different kind of chaos. Thousands of people who are stranded in flooded homes communicate their locations however they can. Spray painting rooftops, waving from upper story windows, calling family members who call news stations, who call emergency services. The response from local, state, and federal authorities is widely criticized as slow, uncoordinated, and inadequate. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, faces fierce criticism for its lack of preparation and its failure to mobilize resources quickly enough for a disaster that its own simulations had predicted in.
And that's what the whole thing was back then. They say FEMA wasn't even moving quick enough. They waited so long to come in and provide resources. They didn't even provide resources immediately when they got there. That was crazy. I remember hearing that.
Detail. One of the most haunting images of the entire disaster is the sight of people, mostly elderly, many of them without the means to leave, stranded on elevated highway overpasses in the August heat, surrounded by floodwater, waiting for help that takes days to arrive. Doris Commerdell, a 93-year-old woman from Chalmette in St. Bernard Parish, is rescued from her flooded home after spending several days trapped there. She had lived in the same house for decades. When rescuers reached her, she had been surviving on what little food she had managed to move to her second floor. Her neighborhood, like most of St. Bernard Parish, was completely destroyed. She never returned. The death toll accumulates slowly, because
Look
for
at that. That's
days
terrible,
and then
man.
weeks, the full
That's
scale of
terrible.
what has happened is impossible to assess. Victims are found in attics, in flooded cars, in homes that look intact from the outside, but contain the remains of people who could not get out. Nearly 40% of the fatalities are attributed to drowning. Almost half of all victims are over the age of 74. The storm did not
Grandparents,
kill randomly.
great-grandparents.
It killed the people who had the fewest options. The official death toll from Hurricane Katrina, revised by the National Hurricane Center in 2023, stands at approximately 1,400 people. The total damage reaches an estimated $125 billion, making it one of the costliest natural disasters in American history. In Louisiana alone, over 1,500 people lose their lives. More than 134,000 housing units in New Orleans, 70% of all occupied homes in the city, sustain damage. 1 million housing units across the broader Gulf Coast region are affected.
Damn.
The population of New Orleans falls from nearly 485,000 before the storm to an estimated 230,000 by July of the following year.
Bro, the whole city population got cut in half. That is devastating.
More than half the city gone. Some neighborhoods never recover. The lower 9th Ward, one of the hardest hit
Never
areas,
recover.
remains visibly scarred for years.
Imagine.
Empty lots where houses once stood, streets that were rebuilt but never repopulated. In June 2006, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers officially acknowledges that faulty design specifications, incomplete sections, and substandard construction of levee segments contributed to the
Substandard. They finally admit, a year later, to faulty levee. Bro, they knew beforehand and they did nothing about it. Engineers went up to government officials presenting the findings and the studies, and they laughed him off. You're dealing with evil people here. That's why I say the government is responsible. The city officials, the government officials, they're responsible for this catastrophe. And then people need to be recompensated, bro. There's even rebuilding is not even going to heal the damage that has taken place. People lost their lives. They lost their homes. They lost everything that was dear to them. And they had nothing left and nowhere to go.
flooding of New Orleans. A subsequent analysis by the American Society of Civil Engineers concludes that 2/3 of the flooding could have been avoided if the levees had held. The
Could have been
deadliest
avoided
aspect of Hurricane Katrina was
if
not
they would
the
have just
storm.
acted.
It was the infrastructure failure that followed it. And that
It wasn't the storm that caused the damage. It was the infrastructure. The weak and faulty infrastructure that was put in place that they knew about already. That's just disgusting, man. That's evil. How can you know about this and do nothing about it? And you laugh off the engineers who's telling you about it and telling you need to do something. And you laughing him off. That's evil, bro. Ain't no way around. That's evil.
infrastructure failure was not inevitable. It was preventable. Not because no one knew,
Preventable.
but because nothing was done.
The Army Corps of Engineers is spending $14.3 billion to bolster New Orleans' hurricane protection system.
Do I feel safe? Do I think the Corps of Engineers has done enough to protect this city, to protect this area? No.
Hell no.
New floodgates,
Hell
pumps,
no.
and surge barriers are constructed. The system that exists today is substantially more robust than the one that failed in 2005. Whether it is enough remains an open question that every hurricane season brings back into focus.
Bro, what if something else like that happens? Another hurricane. That's gonna be crazy, man. Who knows if it will withstand? All right, y'all, that's it for the video, man. I hope y'all enjoyed it. It's really devastating to look back and see what happened, man. At the time, I was 11 years old and I couldn't really grasp the the magnitude of what happened. We would see videos, we would see the news. It would be on news every day. But to be safe in my home and to be watching it on camera, you're not able to grasp the magnitude of the situation. You can only see videos and people losing everything on camera, bro. And you could just think, damn, that's sad, but it's not me. It's cold, man. And just to think that government officials, they knew about it beforehand, years beforehand. 40 years of study. That's evil. But shout out to y'all, man. Y'all have a good one, bro. I'll see y'all on the next one. Peace.